Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining the Tuesday training with Money Follows the Person Housing. Nikki Hansen will be presenting from Valley Christian Counseling. I just lost my screen here. Counseling and Wellness, and she will be presenting on the Nervous System 101, Calming the Stress Response. Just a reminder, please keep your microphones and cameras off so that they avoid distractions. And if you have any questions, please type them in the chat, and then we'll have Nikki address those at the end of her presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. Nikki, my name is Nikki Olsworth. So I'm an occupational therapist at Valley Christian Counseling. I also work at Essentia Health here in Fargo. I specialize, my specialty is with the brain. And today we are going to talk about the nervous system because I think there's so much that we can do to really help our bodies to work well. So this is just a little picture of my people. And I'm hoping that you get some calming strategies from what we talk about today. So the first thing is that our bodies are so smart. They really do inform us of what's going on. They know when things are out of whack and they tell us. And our bodies really were created to give us valuable information. So we're going to start out today, and I'm going to give you just a little bit of time. I want you to answer these first few slides for me. So I want you to think about 2 environments in which you feel stressed and 3 activities within those environments that cause you to feel stressed. So I'm going to give you a minute to jot those down. All right. And then we're going to go on to the next slide. So 2 environments in which you do not feel stressed and 3 activities within those environments that decrease your stress. Okay. So last time that I was with you, we talked about sleep, and I'm hoping to make some connections between our nervous system, kind of what we do during the day and how that impacts sleep, and some things that we can do from a nervous system perspective that do help our sleep. So last time we talked about, instead of asking, how are you doing, try asking, how are you sleeping? You'll learn a lot more. And I think it tells us a lot about what's going on with the nervous system. So this is a way that I began to talk about the nervous system. I really came to this through talking about memory. I have worked with clients for many years on that have had injuries to the brain. And so we would talk about memory from just a simplified way to think about it. Memory is really complex, but you can break it down into simple components to understand it. And so very simply, we have input that comes in, that's the file, and we transfer it into our storage system. So you can see that filing cabinet. And then hopefully we can pull it out and use it later. So we can have breakdown in attention. We can have trouble getting it in the first place, or we can have if you think about the files, you know, things that we really love, we have a highly developed drawer for. And things that maybe aren't quite as important, that gets stuck in the messy drawer or maybe even scattered around on the floor. And that can make it a little bit harder to pull it out and use it later. So we can have trouble with input or trouble with storage. So one of the things to know is that when we go to focus, so we're going to take that information in, what our brain uses to focus is our senses. So right now, if you are listening to this and you're looking at the slides, you are using your vision and your hearing, but your body is also taking in information. It knows that it's sitting in a chair or on another surface. So we're using all of our senses to process what's going on. And whenever we kick in our sensory system to pay attention, we're kicking in what I'm going to call our alerting nervous system. And so when we do that, to some degree, our heart rate goes up, our blood pressure goes up, and we pull in our focus. And actually, on the back of our eyes, on our retina, we have an area towards the middle called the macula, where we have we see the most detail. So we pull information onto that detailed area of the retina so that we can see detail. And that again kicks in that alerting nervous system response. We only encode if we're calm. So we only put things in storage. It's a little bit more complicated than this, but I want you to think of it this way. We put things in storage when we're calm. And so I really think of that interplay between alerting and calming nervous system as a teeter-totter. And so we go back and forth on that teeter-totter throughout the day. The path of least resistance is for us to be alert or for us to be stressed. And so our body wants to keep us safe, right? I think from days of old where we didn't have shelter the way we do now, and there were a lot more risks, our body wanted to keep us alive. And so our nervous system kicks in that way. So it takes more effort to calm things down. So stress, and again, when I think of stress, it's that release of adrenaline, noradrenaline, and cortisol. And if you know anything about those stress hormones, cortisol is what's damaging if it's elevated for prolonged periods of time. So stress can be associated with a variety of unwanted outcomes: decreased well-being, increased incidence of physical disease, cardiovascular, asthma, headaches, increased incidence of mental health conditions such as PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, anxiety. But that isn't the end of the story. We also are able to adapt to things. And so we are made to be resilient. And there are a number of people who exhibit improved health in the face of challenges. We actually couldn't focus if we didn't have the stress response. So, I mean, it's a really beautiful thing. It helps us to get things done. And I really think of it on a continuum. So this is showing this continuum. So you can see off on the left side, more in red, that is what I would call our alerting nervous system, or our sympathetic nervous system is another name for it. It's also called the fight or flight response. And then if you go over to that right side that's in the green, that is what I'm terming the calming nervous system, or the parasympathetic response, which is also called rest and digest. It's actually when we're digesting food, we're put into that parasympathetic nervous system. So this fight or flight response is a generic chain of events in response to a stimuli. I think it's interesting because it's generic. I want you to think there are levers that you can pull in front of stress. So what happens is the hypothalamus causes that sympathetic nervous system to release adrenaline, noradrenaline, and cortisol. And these hormones propel the body into a state of arousal. And so we are putting all of our energy into figuring out, what is this threat? What is this thing in front of us? And again, it's on a continuum. So you can kind of see, I actually think that if you look on this continuum, I think you should switch alert and calm and alert around. So I would say, when we go to focus, think of that as kind of we're in alert stage, or maybe an alert and calm stage. And then as we start to, maybe there's something that's a little bit more dangerous, we become more highly alert, and then we become stressed, very stressed and panicked. So we move up that continuum. And again, that path of least resistance is for us to move up the continuum rather than down. And so our metabolism decreases when we're in that sympathetic state. We have increased heart rate and blood pressure. Our breathing rate is more rapid and shallow. We might even hold our breath. We have increased muscle tension, and again, that cortisol release. I really became aware of this to a greater degree. I think even how it affected my attention when we used to live in Rochester, and we'd go up to the cities, and I was driving in the cities, and the traffic was really busy. And I remember feeling paranoid about the driver next to me, and I looked at my body posture, and my arms were just gripping that steering wheel, and I was holding my breath. And I slowed down my breathing. I relaxed my arms, and I actually could feel my vision open up. So I went from tunnel vision to just that wider vision, and my paranoia about the driver next to me went away. So we have these levers that we can pull in front of stress. This is a slide actually that I talked a little bit about last time, because sleep deprivation is actually a physiological and psychological stressor. And so it messes with our cortisol. We have a natural cortisol rhythm, and sleep deprivation can impact that. And so this is just showing a little bit of what's happening. This can happen if we are chronically stressed. Our cortisol can actually become flattened. So we miss that peak in the morning that kind of gets us out of bed and gets us moving. And then we have increased levels in the afternoon and evening when they really should be going down. And so there's a slower recovery of that cortisol response. The secretion pattern is dysregulated, and we have impaired stress reactivity. This is something, again, we can pull levers in front of us to work on relaxing in the evening, to work on getting rid of excess cortisol. So heightened cortisol during the day can negatively impact metabolism, blood pressure, immune response. There's a decrease in the innate and the adaptive immunity, leading to a turning on of autoimmune conditions. There's a dysregulation of digestive processes, reproductive processes, and growth processes. It can impact fertility in men and women. I know about a study in which men who slept 6 hours versus 8 hours had 30% lower testosterone levels. It can negatively impact mood, motivation, and fear. It can lead to headaches. It can impact memory and concentration, and it leads to neuroinflammation. So there are 3 main ways to calm down this nervous system. This is the good news. We really do have these levers. So the 3 things that I love to talk about, we were talking about when we're stressed, we hold our breath, or we have more shallow and rapid breathing. So the first thing that you can do to calm down your nervous system is a long out breath. Anytime that we do we are slowing down our heart rate, and that calms us down. Panoramic vision is another way to calm down the nervous system. So you heard me, I talked about when we go to focus, when we're focused on something. So I want you to think right now you're focusing on a computer screen. And so your eyes are focused. And what's interesting about screens is that there's more visual convergence required. So our eyes they pull in a little bit more when we look at a screen versus looking at a book. And it has to do with the colors of the light coming off the screen. It's in part due to that. And so that pulls in focus a little bit more. So our breathing, we tend to hold our breath when we look at screens. There's actually something called screen apnea, which is saying we hold our breath when we look at screens. Now, if I lift my eyes up and I just try to take in the view around me, so I'm not focusing on one thing, I have kind of a softer focus. That is panoramic vision. And panoramic vision calms us down. When we allow that peripheral vision to open up, it has a positive impact on our stress levels. And then the last thing is movement. I think movement is really powerful. When I talk to people, I often will ask, have you had an experience where you were stressed and then you went on a walk and you felt better? And it's because in movement, we make side to side eye movements that calm the stress center of the brain. It calms the amygdala of the brain. It quiets it down when we move. What's interesting about movement is that if we move a little bit during the day, we get more deep sleep at night. And deep sleep is our deepest form of rest. It's typically when we encode information that we've learned during the day, and it's also when the brain washes itself. And so walking, movement, actually there's some mimicking of that deep sleep, which I think is so interesting. So movement is really good for us. I will say that I've had clients over the years that I have one particular person that comes to mind who she worked in a really busy job and she'd probably get like 14,000 steps in her shift. And she moved with a mission. So her eyes, she'd always be in kind of this fight or flight response, just moving so quickly around. And so we talked about really slowing down, being more aware of where she's at, trying to open up her peripheral vision and start to enjoy a little bit of what's around her. And she noticed that she felt so much better. She actually had coworkers that came up to her and asked her, "What are you doing? You're so different." And so just a simple thing like um, making our vision wider and moving, right, can really help us to feel good. So what we do during the day is repeated at night. So we go from that alerting to that calming nervous system. And again, I think of that as a teeter-totter. We go back and forth throughout the day. And so if you have your foot on the gas pedal all day long, you're going to have a harder time getting good restorative rest at night. If you take time to rest during the day, you're going to be able to rest more at night. So how we think about stress is really important. And I want you to think about this. Do you think stress is bad or stress is good? Or do you have another thing in your mind that you tell yourself about stress? I think what's important again is that it's actually a generic process. Your body doesn't know the difference between good and bad stress. How you think about stress does matter, though. Your body will react more negatively to negative thought patterns or more positively to positive thought patterns. So people who look at if they see this stress as a challenge, something to kind of lean into versus something to be, I don't know, avoided or run away from, their body has a really different reaction to stress. And I think there's another thing about stress in working with people with stress over the years. Um, there's a really key thing embedded in every stress is something that's important to you. And so kind of figuring out, why am I stressed about this situation? What is it about this? What am I wanting? just even acknowledging how stress is impacting you can help us to feel calmer. Just I am stressed right now, and kind of being aware of that. And then asking yourself some of those questions. What is it that's important to me right now? What is it that I'm wanting? So welcoming stress, when you look at, okay, here's this thing, and stress is a way to give you energy to overcome the challenge. And so you can, if you're able to look at it in such a way where you can welcome it, it can give you more energy. There's a program called Rethinking Stress by Spark Tools. It's a Stanford University program, and it's done by Allie Crum and Sean Aker. Sean Aker actually wrote a book called The Happiness Advantage. He's part of the positive psychology movement. He's really great to listen to. And he talked about when he was in the Navy that they were doing physical training, and they were kind of griping about it. They just didn't really want to be doing it. And there were a group of seasoned Marines that were working not very far away from them. And they were leaning into it. They would give it a wah, kind of a just this, they had a completely different reaction. This, yes, I'm up for it. And so they were using that energy to welcome the challenge. And it made a big difference in how they were leaning into it. I really, if you've learned much about oysters, I think they're really interesting. You can see in this picture that shellacking of the inside of the shell. And what happens with an oyster is that there is this irritant that comes in. And so it comes in, and that oyster closes around it, right? It's closed around it, and it begins to shellac that irritant. It doesn't spit it out. It doesn't run and hide. It doesn't pretend that it isn't there. It wraps around it, and it makes it something beautiful. And that is how the pearl gets formed. And so I think there's more to be learned by what's happening from a stress response, what's happening with our stress. I also really like, there's a book by Alyssa Epple called The Stress Prescription. And one of the things that she talks about that is so interesting, she talks about, am I trying to solve the unsolvable problem? So she uses this analogy of, she has this rope and it's attached to a brick wall. And when she's stressed, she's just pulling on that rope, right? She's just pulling it. And she looks down at her hands and they're all chafed. And she looks up at the brick wall and it hasn't moved. And so she says, am I, trying to solve this thing that I can't? And she'll tell herself, put down the rope. From a spiritual perspective, I was struggling with something, and I had gone in and talked to our priest about it. And what he said to me is, he said, what you don't see is that God is untying that knot. You need to wait for it. And there's a lot of wisdom in that, because there's a lot of problems that we cannot solve. I also like to think of this a little bit like the CEO versus the janitor. I think sometimes I think I'm the CEO and I have control over things that I actually don't. And it's often better if I show up as the janitor and I can kind of sweep the floor. I can do the things that I need to, but there's a lot that is not within my control. So what are some ways that we can reduce cortisol? There are so many good ways. And what we're going to focus on breath in some of the upcoming slides. We talked a little bit about movement previously. And so you can see that there. I want you to think about rhythm with movement too, how good it is. I think about the brain and rhythm. Rhythm is so good for us because it lights up one side of the brain and then the other. And so we have walking on here, we have dancing on here. And then we have panoramic vision, that taking in a beautiful view. There's actually a healthcare design expert named Roger Ulrich, and in 1984, he discovered that hospital patients with windows that faced trees recovered quicker and asked for less pain medication than patients who had a view of a brick wall. And I really, I worked at Mayo for a number of years, and what was interesting there, they have they do focus on beauty. If you've ever been in the grounds, like it is beautiful. And in the room, they don't use abstract art, they have landscapes. Again, that kind of panoramic view. They not all of them are landscapes, but they have the art is grounded in reality and something beautiful. And so I think that's really interesting to think about. And so kind of, can we find more beautiful views? Um, Hydration is a really simple thing. I love teaching people about hydration. And I have to say, like, I've done a few hydration challenges. And the second time that I did a hydration challenge, I realized that I was hitting a wall in the afternoon. I know after the first one, I was drinking more water, but that second time, so I had this day where I was hitting a wall, and I would say that that would happen to me a couple of times a month. And I just would feel like I'm done. I want to go home. I don't want to do anymore. And I realized I was dehydrated. And dehydration is a stressor. You increase your cortisol levels when you're dehydrated. So just know that, like, being hydrated can lower your stress response. Um, Nature, beauty. I actually want you to look up fractals. And so maybe if you have a piece of paper next to you, write down fractals. I would love you to learn more about fractals. And it's amazing how we get calmed by nature in ways that we're not even aware of. And here we are, we're going to be going into the winter. I think there's beauty in the winter too, but house plants can be something that we have inside that bring about a little bit of that natural beauty inside. Um, and then we have connection on there. We know that I love I love learning about how we're made. There's another neat study where they had people that were going to climb a mountain. And when they had one other person with them, it didn't look as steep. When they were alone, the mountain looked steeper to them than when they were with another person. And I think that's fascinating. It just shows on a really basic level how when we feel we have somebody with us, that we really can weather things better. Gratitude is so beautiful. Research shows that practicing gratitude every day can help to reduce cortisol levels by 23%, which can improve your mental and physical health. I have a favorite. This is another Alyssa Epple story. She was the stress researcher who wrote the stress prescription. And they were studying mitochondria in caregiving moms. So these were moms with children that had autism. And they found that those moms that had more positive emotions at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day had healthier mitochondria. And our mitochondria, I think of them as like the engine of the cell or the powerhouse of the cell, kind of gives us more gas. Um, so I think isn't that fascinating that more just spending some time on more positive, um, eliciting those positive emotions at the beginning and end of the day can make us healthier. So we're going to focus on breath, which is a really simple tool with big rewards. So you can use your breath to alter your brain and your body for greater focus and resilience, and to change the way that you respond to stressful situations in real time. You can learn to direct your breath at will to decide if you're going to accelerate. Are you going to step on the gas? Are you going to put on the brakes, or are you going to go on cruise control? You can control those internal levers. It can help you to let go of doubt, to be more present, and to refocus on the big picture. And so I think of this on the slide, we're talking about attentional breath work and intentional breath work. So attention, like an example of attentional breath work would be every day you set a timer for 10 minutes and you focus on your breath. And maybe you do like a loving kindness meditation. Um, Maybe you pray, but you're spending time just slowing down, maybe listening a little bit more to your life. Intentional breath work is finding every day, finding one opportunity to shift your mental and physical state using at least 3 energizing or 3 calming breaths. I love it when people keep a journal and they write just a little bit about what they're doing. Because if you write even just a little bit and you connect that act of breath work to how how it made you feel, you are much more likely to continue to do that. So, breath work reduces symptoms associated with anxiety, insomnia, depression. It boosts your immune system. It helps you to recover from injury, and it can relieve chronic pain. So we are going to try this right now. So first of all, I want you to find your diaphragm. So here's what I'm going to have you do. I want you to kind of sit back in your chair, get comfortable where you are, and I want you to take your hand and place it below your rib cage. So kind of above your belly, below your rib cage. And I want you to do a quick sniff for me. And you should feel a jump in that area. And that jump is your diaphragm. Okay, so what we're going to do with this breath is we are going to inhale, and we want that diaphragm area to expand. So we want our belly to come out. And so we're going to close our eyes. We're going to take a deep inhale to a silent count of 4. Hold it for 2 seconds. Exhale to a count of 8. Let's do that one more time. Okay. Do you feel more calm? Or do you feel more energized? You just practiced intentional breathing. This is one of my quick and easy techniques. When I learned about this physiological sigh, I really, I use it and I have taught it to my clients. I used to teach people diaphragmatic breathing. I love diaphragmatic breathing, but it takes some practice. And the beautiful thing about the physiological sigh is you can do it anywhere. Um, you can start it now after we're done, and you can use it when you're walking. You can use it in between, if you do have something that you know is a little bit more stressful, you can use it before you're getting into that. Just give yourself a little bit more gas, or while you're in that situation, just to calm yourself down. So the way that we do a physiological sigh is we take 2 breaths in through the nose and 1 long exhale through the mouth. And so it looks like this. So that first breath, you're expanding the lungs. The second sniff, you're expanding the alveoli, the little air sacs. And then that long out breath, you're offloading carbon dioxide and you're slowing down your heart rate. So we're going to do that again. If you do 2 to 5 of those within 45 seconds, your heart rate will go down, and your blood pressure will go down. I have a favorite neuroscientist. His name is Andrew Huberman, and his lab studies stress. And they were doing a research study and they needed people to be calm consistently, and they were using meditation, and it just didn't work for everybody. So they went back to the drawing board. They came across this research from the 1930s. I actually think about it when a child sobs at the end of their crying, they go, that's a physiological sigh. So this research in the 1930s found that people would do this when they were sleeping. We'll do it during the day to just calm ourselves down without being aware of it. And so it's something that we can do. They used it in this research study and it worked 100% of the time. So again, it's just a really small practice and there is big reward for it. So an energizing breath is actually the opposite. So let's say that you've been under some chronic stress and you're waking up one morning and you're realizing I am sluggish. I'm just having a really hard time getting going. You could use one of these breaths to give yourself some more energy to get going. And so it really is kind of the opposite of what we've been doing. So it's a long inhale and a short exhale. And if you do that, that will kick in that alerting nervous system response. It will wake you up more. So in general, you can energize with a long inhale and a short exhale, and you can calm with a short inhale and a long exhale. Now we're going to talk a little bit about emotions because I think this is just a gold mine. There's a lot that we can do here. Um, there, the first thing about emotions is that we need all of the emotions. We need every emotion. And when I think of things like anger, we often need some anger to kind of push us, to get us moving. And so emotions are not a negative thing, but emotions can be depleting or they can be renewing. So we need fear and sadness and pain and disgust. It's your early warning system to keep you safe. All emotions help survival. Depleting emotions are more chaotic though, and they put us into a state of imbalance. And over time, we know it can cause damage. And so we know with depleting emotions, again, not negative emotions, but depleting emotions, such as fear and frustration, impatience and anger, that they can have a toxic effect on us and cause the release of stress hormones, which can result in reduced muscle mass, brain cell death, impaired memory. It can accelerate aging. It can decrease mental function, and it can diminish our performance. This is interesting. When scientists place a cold virus into the noses of 100 people, only 25 to 40 get sick. The virus is necessary, but not sufficient. If you are an introvert or a negative person, you're more likely to develop a cold from a nose full of germs. So just kind of those negative thinking patterns can deplete us and make us more cortisol dominant. And just something to think about. I also really, shame and guilt, I think, are some really important things for us to think about. I think it's really important to kind of check our thinking that shame is really thinking there's something wrong with me, and guilt is there's something wrong with what I did. I was just reading a book called Secrets from the Eating Lab, and they were talking about nutrition research, weight loss research, and they talked about how guilt can motivate us to repair. So when we've done something wrong, it can push us to fix it, to do something right. But shame has been shown to lead to a release of cortisol and pro-inflammatory cytokines linked to depression, anxiety, and low self-esteem. So I think really checking our thinking and really separating who we are, that we are good, separating that from our behavior, that we can do things that aren't always good, and just separating that shame from that guilt. Renewing emotions. So emotions and attitudes such as love, care, courage, tolerance, appreciation create neurochemicals that regenerate your system and offset energy drain, resulting in increased longevity, increased resilience to adversity, increased memory, increased problem solving, increased intuition and creativity, increased job performance and achievement. Renewing emotions recharge our battery, and it helps us to build resilience. When people frequently categorize, label, and understand their emotions, they can recover from cancer faster. This means that people who effectively categorize emotions might be better protected against chronic inflammatory processes that lead to bad health. So, I love that we, again, have agency. We are able to pull levers that can help us. We can we can move from this place of depletion to a place of renewal. And I'm going to show you a little grid. So this grid is showing kind of what we talked about at the beginning of the talk. We talked about the nervous system response. So you can see the sympathetic at the top, right? So the up and down arrow in the middle, you can see sympathetic down to parasympathetic. So high heart rate down to low heart rate and relaxation. And then you can see another axis, that horizontal axis. And on the left-hand side is cortisol, and on the right-hand side is DHEA. And then you can kind of see where they broke it down into depleting emotions and attitudes and renewing emotions and attitudes. So the depleting on the left and the renewing on the right. And so when we're angry, for example, our heart rate is higher and our cortisol is higher. When we're enthusiastic, our heart rate is higher at our DHEA. DHEA works as a natural antidepressant in our body. And then, cortisol, we've talked about that. That's what's released together with adrenaline, noradrenaline, and cortisol with that stress response. And then on the low side, you can see on the left side, maybe more sadness, or the person is more cynical. And so that's maybe they're not initiating, they don't have as much energy, that heart rate is still lower, but they're more cortisol dominant. And then on the right side, you can see where maybe they're in a place of patience or a place of appreciation. So it's still heart rate's lower, but they're releasing more of those good neurochemicals, of the good hormones such as DHEA. I really think we can think about that we're able to pull levers to manage this emotional landscape. And it's interesting to map it out on a grid and see where you're spending time. Self-awareness really is key to any sort of change. If you're not aware of these energy drains, are you really able to stop them very effectively? And when you are aware, how does that look different? What does that look like? You learn to plug those energy leaks, and you have more capacity at the end of the day. And so I like this idea of, I've heard it described as intelligent energy management versus stress management. And so kind of being aware of where your energy is going. And I'm going to link this gratitude study back to that grid that we were just looking at. So there's this classic gratitude study where they tested hormone levels in 45 healthy adults, and they trained 30 of those people to replace negative thought patterns with feelings of compassion and appreciation. And after 1 month, they went back and they looked at everyone's hormone levels. And there was no change in the control group. They didn't move. but the subjects who underwent gratitude training had a 23% reduction in cortisol and a remarkable 100% increase in the feel-good DHEA hormone. So DHEA, again, is that it's naturally occurring hormone that acts like an antidepressant. And so I'm just going to go back to kind of have you look at that. So a decrease in cortisol and 100% increase in DHEA along that hormonal response. Okay. This is a little bit from heart math. I don't know if anybody has heard of heart math. I've recently done some training. This is really interesting. One of the things that research shows is that the heart sends more information to the brain than the brain sends to the heart. And that incoherent patterns lead in the heart lead to incoherent patterns in the brain. And coherent patterns in the heart lead to more coherent patterns in the brain. And you can see on the bottom there, coherent heart signals facilitate brain function, including decision-making, reaction times, social awareness, and ability to self-regulate. And one of the things that heart math does is what's used is regulating breathing and then those emotions, activating a positive emotion. And what they found is that when you activate that positive emotion, you stay in coherent heart rate patterns for longer than just working on breathing. And so we're going to practice a quick coherence technique right now. So this is one of heart math's foundational techniques. So again, I want you to get comfortable in your chair. We're going to try to neutralize negative emotion and move into a more balanced mind, body, spirit state. We're going to stop some of those energy drains of the depleting state. And you can use it in as little as a few minutes. So I hope you're comfortable in your chair. Uncross your legs if they're crossed. I want you to focus your mind in the area of your heart. Imagine that your breath is flowing in and out of your heart or your chest area. Breathe just a little slower and deeper than usual. Find an easy rhythm that's comfortable. As you continue heart-focused breathing, make a sincere attempt to experience a regenerative feeling, such as appreciation or care for someone or something in your life. Try to re-experience the feeling that you have for someone you love, a pet, a special place, or focus on a feeling of calm and ease. Okay. So I want you to take what came to mind, and if you have a piece of paper next to you, write that thing down. And I want you to take time at the end of the day today and spend just a little time slowing down your breathing and re-experiencing that feeling that you have. And then again tomorrow, when you wake up in the morning, maybe sometime during the day, and again in the evening, just spending a little time. And what I love about this technique, I think it's so interesting. We are relational creatures. We're born into families, we live in communities, we grow in relationships of love. So, of course, it's love, it's that activating emotion, right? That can change us. And that always comes from an experience, from a relationship. And so I think that's a really beautiful thing. Um, Again, that how mountains don't look as steep when we have somebody with us that we can enjoy, even when these people or what comes to mind to me sometimes when I do this is I have a really sweet little puppy, little guy. And so I think about him and just unconditional love that he gives. Um, I think that I think about the pandemic actually when I think about burnout. I also think about caregiver fatigue, that when we have constant energy expenditures without adequate rest and recovery, that's what leads to burnout and more errors and health challenges, and it really impacts our performance. So the goal really is rest and recovery. And so, what helps you to rest and recover? I want you to have a little time with that, to think about that. Because again, the more you rest during the day, the more you're going to be able to truly rest at night as well. So, I have something else that I want to add because I love this therapeutic journaling and I just don't think that it's out there enough like it should be. So, therapeutic journaling, if you go to the VA Whole Health Library. You can find a whole handout on therapeutic journaling. It is a really amazing technique. It was developed by a Dr. James Pennebaker out of the University of Texas in Austin. He's a psychologist. And he found with his students, if he would prescribe journaling, so he would recommend that his students journal for 3 to 5 sessions over the course of 4 days for 15 to 20 minutes. That's all. It's just this short duration. And if they would work through maybe a stressor or something that's going on, that they would become healthier. They needed less pain medication and less counseling. Since he started there's over 200 peer-reviewed articles on this method, and it's been shown to improve health in so many ways. It's been linked to improvements in both physical and psychological health. It's used in non-clinical and clinical populations, and it's associated with long-term decreases in health problems such as immune system function. And so here's just a few people who can benefit. But again, the list is much more extensive because they have all of these peer-reviewed articles. So it's been shown that it can improve lung functioning in asthma. It can decrease disease severity in rheumatoid arthritis. It can improve pain and physical health in cancer. It can improve immune response in HIV infections. It can decrease hospitalizations for cystic fibrosis. It can it can decrease pain intensity in women with chronic pelvic pain. It can improve sleep onset latency in poor sleepers. So any of those of you that have a hard time falling asleep, this is a really great thing to do. It can improve post-operative course. In addition, it can be helpful with life circumstances like breakup with a life partner, death of a loved one, unemployment, natural disaster, or just general stressful events. I think what is so beautiful about this method is that it really helps you to, it gives very specific directions on how to do it. So I would really encourage you to pull up the directions. And it says, like if there's something that's too stressful for you, don't write about it right now. Just write about the things that you can handle. But when we look at things and we incorporate them into our life story, like what is happening in our life, and when we can move from here's where I started, here's where I'm at, and here's where I'm headed. What happens with the stress response is we get stuck in here's where I'm at, and we don't know how to get out of it. We don't know how to build a bridge from where we are to where we're headed. So this is a really beautiful method to help us to figure out how to move from where we are to where we're headed. I've had clients do this, and it's just a really cool thing to see. I had a woman who I worked with who said, I don't know what it is about it. And she said, I love it. But the first few days that I did this, I cried. And she said, by the third day, I just felt more like myself. And I actually, early last year, I just felt stuck with something going on in my life. And I used this technique, and I had insights that I actually wrote them down, and I still go back to them today because they were so helpful in just how to face things, how to look at certain things. And again, that how do we continue to move forward? Um, so this talks a little bit about truth telling and faithful, accurate reporting of what we experienced is good for us in the short and the long term. When people accurately and truthfully report an experience, even if it's stressful and traumatic, the repeated activation of the prefrontal cortex during the truth telling leads to more activity in the prefrontal cortex. It creates a more cohesive framework in understanding what happened. All the discombobulation and lack of coherency, which leads to increased stress response, is resolved. So basically, kind of what it's saying is when we're stressed, that stress response is housed in the amygdala of the brain, kind of a deeper area of the brain, and it's lighting up. And when we do this, we really face it and look at it. We are processing it in our frontal lobes. And that takes us out of that amygdala response. Um, when one sees all the positive shifts in immune system functioning, better ability to deal with an infection, when the prefrontal cortex organizes why it is so active, then it becomes less active. That's why we see reductions in anxiety, improvements in sleep. Nervous system and immune system are in direct communication. Truth telling over time has the net effect of moving us from the limbic system, from that amygdala response to that prefrontal cortex, that higher order thinking of our brain at the front of our brain. Um, Good stuff. So I would highly recommend this as just a way to work through stressful things. What is beautiful about the brain is that we can create new pathways. There is not just one way. And so just as grass is worn down to create a new path when we walk on it frequently, neuroplasticity can also create new paths in the nervous system. Neuroplasticity allows you to learn new skills, recover from injuries, and build resilience. Resilience is a skill set. It can also cause unhelpful pathways to shrink or disappear. Neuroplasticity can create changes that directly impact how we feel. That is hope. I also love this. This is a little bit on hope from Arthur Brooks. He wrote a book together with Oprah called Build the Life That You Want. Pessimism is really a pervasive emotional state that can cripple individuals and cause them to expect the worst outcome and often drives them to isolate themselves from others. Pessimism is unproductive and inaccurate. It tends to lead to avoidance behaviors and passivity when confronted with challenges, which exacerbates feelings of hopelessness and despair. Optimism seems like an antidote, but it can lead to unrealistic hopes. So, what is the alternative? Um, Hope. I really want you to think about hope as an action, as a verb. It's something that we do, it's positive change through action, and it leads to better physical and mental health. When I look at clients that I'm working with at the foundation, I really am paying attention to, are they engaged or are they disengaged? When we engage, we continue to build more neural connections. When we disengage, that's when things get trimmed away. So I want you to think of hope as an active thing, as a verb. as engagement. Resiliency, harnessing inner strength to rebound from a setback or challenge, that there are levers that you can pull in front of stress. We are not alone in this. We can change within relationship. And I repeated that because I think it's just that important. Um, Having at least one other person that's there for you is likely to help in overcoming difficulties that you've faced. Hartling, there's an article from 2008, and that this psychologist has challenged the view of resilience as individual toughness, and instead notes that it involves relationships. She believes that Western ideals have focused on the need to tap into the self in overcoming hardships, and as such have ignored the power of social support. And so relationships that foster growth can strengthen resilience through connection. There was an article from 2016 where they looked at resilience from a relational perspective and noted that a family that's resilient when it's resilient when the entire system has the ability to rebound. And they found that families that hold positive outlooks, such as hope and are spiritual, connective, and supportive, are more likely to be resilient. In addition, resilient families are involved in collaborative problem solving. They help each other and they share resources. So I just want you to, I hope you take away a few good things from here. Rethinking Stress by Spark Tools is a nice adjunct to this. And again, I just love therapeutic journaling. So what we focus on is what grows. Questions?
If you have any questions, please put them in the chat so that Nikki can answer them. We'll give it just a couple minutes to see if anybody's in the process of typing, but this was a great presentation.
Oh, good.
I've had a few people texting me telling me how much they needed this right now. So.
Oh, I am so happy to hear that. I also do telehealth if anybody wants to check in here at Valley. I really love to address sleep and stress because I find just those few things, it gives people more of what we need, right? To live. Life is certainly challenging.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the people on the calls right now are probably dealing with some compassion fatigue from dealing with, we have a lot of service providers and apartment managers on here. And so I think this was an excellent topic. So thank you so much.
Good. I think plugging those holes again, and even that quick coherence technique is just a really great way. There's interesting research about heart rate variability, and a lot of people have access to like smartwatches that measure your heart rate. While they measure heart rates measured, but often there's measures of heart rate variability, and you can use that as a tool to practice these, just it alerts you to practicing that breathing technique. I actually think when we see, for some of us, it's so helpful to kind of see what our body is doing. And when we practice breathing and we can see, wow, my heart rate's really different when I do this, it can help us to lean into it more. I think I'm a little bit more on the feeling side. And so I love the idea of just holding on to, just slowing down my breathing and then holding on to these good things in my life. And that really does reset me in ways that other things, I love breathing too, but I love that activating emotion. I think it's beautiful.
Okay, we have a few comments in here.
Okay.
Nicole Hansen, who I'm sorry, I used your name earlier when I was introducing Nikki. Your name had just popped up. So no question, very informative. Thank you very much. Going to put this to work for me.
Right.
Julie is wondering if they could get a copy of the PowerPoint.
Sure. If you can see my email on here. If you would just want to email me, I will send it to you.
Or if you want to send it to us, we can send it out to the whole group.
Oh, sure. I can do that.
Okay. And Savannah said, thank you, great info. And yeah, my favorite part was hope as a verb.
Mm.
Do you have any guided meditations that you can recommend?
Well, I have a preference for non-sleep deep rest. This is getting a little bit into the sleep stuff, but I think non-sleep deep rest is kind of breathing and a body scan. And it works kind of like a nap. In 10 minutes, there's like a 10-minute non-sleep deep rest. It can just give you more gas in the tank. And so I really love that. I think loving kindness meditations are beautiful. You see, I'm from Valley Christian counseling, but my own personal practice, I love a rosary. I know that like a functional attention span is 20 minutes, and I don't know how many of us have a functional attention span anymore, but a rosary takes about 20 minutes. And that is a way to really enter into this mystery of life. What else could I think there's so many good tools out there. It's finding something that corresponds to your experience and leaning into this. I would really encourage small practices to start and linking it to something that you're already doing. And when I say that, I mean, like if you're eating a meal 3 times a day, maybe you spend just a little bit of time at 30 seconds after that meal and do one of these practices. You're going to be much more likely to use it when you need it. But we need to kind of anchor some of these things to our life. I really love a morning and an evening routine. I think kind of slowing down when we start out the day and being a little bit more intentional, and then ending the day with some quiet, with, just one of these practices can be really powerful.
Okay. One more comment. It said, thank you. So great training. Wish to have more trainings in days coming.
Good.
So,
Hey.
okay, well, thank you so much. This is a great training. And if anybody wants to go back and watch it, we've recorded it. And so we should be sending out the recording in the next couple of days and give you a chance to go back and watch it again and pick up other pieces that you may have missed.
Great.
So, well, thank you so much, Nikki. We really appreciate it.
Good. Thank you, Cheryl. I'm glad there's some helpful things here. Have a great day, you guys.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.